This is probably far more serious than a lot of people realise. You may have noticed over the last few days, Kimi Badenoch, new leader of the Conservative Party, accused Nigel Farage and Reform UK of faking the numbers. So this comes with some fairly serious criticism. So I'll explain some of that and the legal implications, potential legal implications in this video. But before we get to that, if you're new to me, I'm Daniel Shensmith, a barrister of England and Wales, and this will be probably the last time I wear this Christmas sweater for this year. So if that's not worth subscribing, I'm not sure what is. So let's get to this post, shall we? So Kimi Badenoch. Now this is a fairly serious and bold claim, which warrants fairly serious criticism. She says, manipulating your own supporters at Christmas, eh, Nigel? It's not real, she says. It's a fake clock coded to tick up automatically. We've been watching the back end for days and can see they've just changed the code to link to a different site, as people point this out. Farage doesn't understand the digital age. This kind of fakery found out pretty quick, and she goes on and on. Now, first of all, for someone, i.e. Nigel Farage, who has, I think, 5-something million followers across various social media outlets, as someone who myself has a moderate following myself, I can say that Nigel Farage does understand the digital age to amass so many followers. I've worked very hard at this, so for Nigel to do so well, I can tell you personally that he does understand the digital age, so that's that one out of the way straight away. But that's just a mere comment, and that would be chalked up to opinion. What's very much more serious here is the first half of that post, where she makes a flat-out bold statement of a claim. It's not a question. It's not inviting you to consider. For example, if I were to say to you, let's take a look at this page, shall we? And if I were to say to you, I'm not, but if I were to say to you, look at that number, that looks like it might be inflated. What do you think? Let me know. If I were to say things like that, that is merely speculation. It's merely giving you some kind of opinion. If I were to go so far as to say, it's not unlike politicians to inflate certain things, maybe this is inflated, that would not be such a serious statement. Now, as it happens, and for the avoidance of doubt, this has been independently verified by a number of news outlets as an absolutely accurate figure. And Reform UK has indeed overtaken the Conservative Party. More about that in a little moment. Back to the claim, because this is a statement of fact. Kimi Badenoch says it's not real. It's a fake clock coded to tick up automatically. That right there is a statement. It's not a question. Now, had that been true, that might be another matter. But of course, that's been now independently verified. And even the Telegraph here, the Telegraph says, on Friday, the Telegraph was shown strong evidence that Reform's figures are based on verified membership data, which is logged in real time through a third-party website. That website is called Nation Builder. Now, if we were to take a look at this website, I can show you, without boring you with all of the science, not that I fully understand all of the science. I've developed software in the past, and I used to study computer science, and other people with PhDs in computer science have also chimed in on this as well. More about them in just a moment. But if we have a look at here, there's a number of ways we can tell that this is at least most probably completely accurate. And those newspapers that have been shown the back end and the statistics and the numbers, etc., they've verified it as being completely accurate. But even from the front end, we can see that it is most likely accurate, because if you look toward the bottom here, this is the developer tools in Chrome. It's available to everybody. It's not a subscription thing or whatever. You can see at the very bottom here, it says network, and under network, you can see this. There's an initiator. This is a JavaScript app running in the back end of the website. More about the back end in a moment, because that's really important, bearing in mind what she said. This is fetching data every so often. And the status 200, that just means okay, it's retrieved it successfully. The size of the data, 900 bytes, whatever, it's retrieving this information on a regular basis. So this is an API, or an API call on the face of it, to pull this data from the database. Now, just a brief moment on that. The data stored in the database is not going to be visible from the website. It's only visible on the database. That is the back end, which is why this is really important in a minute. And even if you look at the source of this website here, again, available to everybody, you can just right click and view source. You can go to the source here and you'll see that the layout of the website is here. The bit that's important is over here. This is the reformparty.uk build JavaScript app running over here under assets, and this is what is retrieving some data every few moments. Now, my first response to that was, it looks like an API call to me, and sure enough, others have come back and said exactly the same thing. But just about the backend bit for a moment, and I'll come back to the law in a minute. I'm just giving you this as the baseline understanding of what's going on here. A PhD in computer science here, Dr. Mariana, says, that's a pretty bold claim to make. And unless you've hacked into the servers that hosts Reform's website, there is no way of you knowing what's happening on the back end. And sure enough, there's been previous stories of Kemi Badenoch having been involved in some kind of hacking in the past. If we jump back in time just for a moment, we see this headline here: Kemi Badenoch admits hacking Labour MP's website. Now, this is not me making a statement of fact. This is a report from Sky News. It says here, a rising star in the Conservative Party has apologised after she's admitting she hacked Labour MP Harriet Harman's website and altered its content. So coming back to here, she says, we've been watching the back end for days, and can also see they've just changed the link, etc. Now, there is no way that she could have been watching the back end, which is, it's not the bit that I'm showing you here. It's not this bit at the bottom showing you what's going on. It's not the source page here, which shows you how the website is being displayed and which JavaScripts and apps are being called to operate, etc. That's not the back end. That's very much the front end. It's the front end and how it's displayed and what apps are being worked, etc. But that is in no way showing you the back end. The only way to see the back end is with authorized or unauthorized access. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that she has unauthorized access. It may well be that she's only been looking at this source here, but that then makes that a false claim anyway, because that is not the back end. Now, as I said, this has been independently verified by a number of different news organisations. Nigel Farage confirms that they opened up their systems to The Telegraph, The Spectator, Sky News and The Financial Times in the interest of full transparency to verify that the data is correct. And Nigel Farage now demands an apology. And so this really now calls into question those statements that have been made and whether or not they are defamatory, because many people may not realise that politicians can be sued for defamation for things said outside Parliament. So the statement made by Kemi Badenoch was essentially an allegation that Reform UK had made a false representation. Now, whilst she fell short of saying that that was with a view to make a gain, that would, on the face of it, be an allegation of fraud. What she said was manipulating your own supporters at Christmas, Nigel, and then it's not real, etc., making the claim that it's fake. Now, under the Fraud Act, making a false representation with a view to make a gain, that is, on the face of it, basic fraud. And again, on the face of it, an allegation of fraud is de facto defamatory. Now, under the Defamation Act 2013, a statement is defamatory if it has caused or is likely to cause serious harm to the reputation of the claimant. And in a case of a trade body, interesting segue in just a moment, it is where that it has caused or is likely to cause serious financial loss to that body. So that segue for a moment, because a lot of people make comments about Reform UK being a limited company. Well, Reform UK being registered as a limited company, selling membership. The Conservative Party is an unincorporated association of members, from my understanding, that sells membership, and they sign to agree to comply with all the rules and regulations and so on. That is essentially just a different structure and a different way of doing things. Now, I sell memberships on my website, which is BlackBeltBarrister.com, linked in the description below, which has exclusive access to some of my content. It is no different really than me selling a membership to that. It is a membership subscription of sorts, just like you buy a subscription to whatever, Netflix. Reform UK being set up as a limited company just means that anybody who runs the company or who is a membership of that company is limited in their liability because it's a limited liability company. In theory, Conservative members may be open to litigation personally, subject to the rules and the regulations and who's responsible for what and so on, and that's dealt with separately. But it is not a limited liability if it's an unincorporated association. But that said, if Reform UK was at risk of serious harm, serious financial loss, then a statement, an allegation of fraud would effectively be a de facto defamatory statement. in my preliminary view, which is of course not legal advice to Reform UK or anybody else watching this, but that's not the point. So on the face of it, this may well be a defamatory statement. So that raises the question of MPs being sued for defamation. Now, MPs making statements in Parliament are protected by parliamentary privilege. They used to be able to waive that privilege under Section 13 of the Defamation Act 1996, but that was repealed in the Deregulation Act of 2015, which repealed specifically Section 13 of the Defamation Act 1996. They used to be able to waive privilege for the things they have said in Parliament, to rely on them in a civil claim for or against them, but they couldn't waive that for others. But that now, and there's more interesting reading on this if you pop over to 5RB's website. There's a breakdown and links to cases and so on, with Section 13 being repealed, and MPs and peers are no longer able to waive parliamentary privilege for the purposes of the defamation proceedings. But as I said, those are for things said in Parliament. This is very much a statement on social media, and Reform UK and Nigel Farage are now calling for an apology because they say that this is a damage to their reputation. But aside from everything else, this is the Streisand effect all over again. Clearly, in my personal view, Kemi Badenoch was probably upset that the numbers outperformed the Conservative Party, and therefore rose, in my view and the newspaper's view, rose to the bait here and responded with what is ultimately a bit of a bitter post on X here, and I agree is probably worthy of an apology. So as I said, probably far more serious than just a bit of a spat on social media. When you make a statement and a claim like that on social media, which is on the face of it an allegation of fraud, which is on the face of it a defamatory statement, that can have very serious consequences, especially when that is made even by an MP, but independently on social media, which is not in Parliament and not protected by parliamentary privilege. So I hope that has been an interesting overview. It is, of course, not to be taken as legal advice by anybody concerned or anybody else for that matter, but I hope you found that interesting. So if you do, please do like the video, subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.